So my name is Liz Arredondo. I'm a visiting scholar at mediaX, and I'm also the robot personality designer at a company called Catalia Health. We make a small robotic wellness coach named Mabu. And I'm very excited for our panel today. I just want to explain a little bit about how today will work. So each panelist will have a short amount of time to introduce themselves, their work, their background, and then we'll get into a panel discussion, and then we will have some time for audience questions at the end. So without further ado, we're going to actually move into the front row here so we can see each other's intros as well. And Cathy, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So my name is Cathy Pearl. I am the Vice President of User Experience at a company called Sensely. And similar to Liz's company, we have instead of a robot, we have a virtual nurse avatar. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But just briefly, this is me at Christmas when I was so excited to get Print Shop, which for those of you who are old enough, was really exciting because I could print my own greeting cards and things like that. So this is just to say that I liked computers a lot when I was younger. So just a very brief history about what I've been up to since then. I spent a little time at NASA working on helicopter pilot simulator, thinking about a pilot's cognitive load. They've got alarms going off. Can they reach all the levers? Things like that. I learned a ton. It was very interesting, but we didn't really have any customers, so that was kind of a bummer. So I moved on to this company called Nuance, which is still around. It's a speech recognition company, and this is where I got introduced to voice user interfaces. And I spent 8 years there learning how to build phone IVR systems, which everybody said they hated. So that was kind of a bummer to be working on that. But I learned a ton. We built some really cool ones, some that I'm still very proud of today. But after that, I swore off speech. I said, I'm not doing that again, ever. And then someone approached me with this other startup and said, hey, I'm doing this cool thing. You want to do it? I said, is it speech recognition? He said, yes. I said, no. He said, come see my demo. So what we had was, it's called Volio. It's sadly no longer around, but it was an iPad app that was these engaging conversations with a recorded actor. This guy here is an Esquire magazine columnist who will tell you how to style your hair. So he'd ask questions like, how long is your hair? And then you answer, and it leads you through a series of, like a choose your own adventure kind of. It's a conversation. So that was really fun, and it kind of got me re-excited about speech. And then finally, a little bit more about my current company, Sensely. This is one of our avatars. Her name is Molly, and she helps people with chronic health conditions, things like congestive heart failure. It's for people who maybe need a little extra care, maybe some remote monitoring, which we just don't have enough nurses and doctors to do that, so it's kind of a bridge. She has a conversation with the patient every day, asks them how they're doing, takes their blood pressure and their weight with Bluetooth devices, triages the information, sends it back to their clinician, lets the clinician know if there's anything wrong. But I'm sure I'll talk more about this on the panel, but some of our patients can get very attached to and engage with our avatar, and we think that really helps with compliance. And my last slide, so I recently wrote a book, Designing Voice User Interfaces. So if you're interested in the subject and you want to learn more about best practices and things like that, check it out. That's it for me.
My name's Omar. Let's see, is this the clicker? I'm head of studio for SoftBank Robotics America. This is our robot, Pepper. Tell you a little bit about her. Pepper is about 4 years old, born in Paris, France. She is currently about 10,000, 11,000 strong in Tokyo, Japan, where she was originally deployed. Our job in the States and the Americas in general is to bring Pepper to all your lives. Pepper is meant to be a robot for B2B applications, particularly hospitality, retail, concierge, informational services. And I'll give you just a little bit, and I'm sure this will come up in our conversation. My background, by the way, I've been an engineer professionally for way too many years, 20 something. The last about 15 of which I've run development organizations and teams. And in particular, I have a background in entertainment and in video games. So I have a number of video game titles published under my name. In the relevance of that is, much like in entertainment, we focus a lot on character design, on story, on interaction, on communication. the best, we were just talking about Coco, the movie Coco here before that, the best forms of entertainment you sort of connect with at a human experience level, and you get something out of it. So what we strive to do is to make an experience that's very relatable. So our robot brings on the appearance and the functionality of communication the way we communicate. At least that's what we achieve for. And we'll probably talk about a lot of that during our panel discussion. I like this slide. I'm not going to talk a lot about this slide, but I use this in other conversations about sort of how computing and technology interfaces have evolved. And if you're as old as I am, you might remember some of these. I'm not that old, but I'm close. So you had to learn how to type at one time to communicate to a thing, and then at some point we learned how to do this on our screens and like that. I'm not really that good at it actually. And then this is an Xbox camera, if you don't know, and so it can start seeing you. So the machine can start seeing you, and then what we're trying to do now is the machine tries to approach how we communicate, not the other way around. That's sort of the quick summary of that. And then the next step in all that is that it just sort of goes away. Like, if we do a good job at our company, people say pepper. They don't say computer or robot or thing. They might trip on pronouns. Hopefully they don't say it, but they say he or she. And we don't tell you which it is. We let you decide. And just sort of some of our motivation that, the UX, you'll notice there's a screen on Pepper, and that's because not all the technologies, like 100%. We need other feedback. But the UX is the entire robot and probably the experience around the robot. So the curated experience where the robot is working. And voice, which we'll talk a lot about, but we speak like this. We speak with emotion. We speak with body language. All of that we are at some level working on with our robots and our AI at SoftBank Robotics. This is a slide about development. We'll talk about that later if you're interested. The one interesting thing, so I've run a lot of engineering teams. I now on my engineering team have linguists, which is fascinating. That's a first for me actually. I've had animators before, but we have animators because, again, we talk like this. And some of my designers, I have one designer who has a theater background. And when he thinks about Pepper and robots, he thinks about a stage and the people on the stage. And all the world's a stage. And he has to, when we do designs, he thinks about the placement of things, not just a robot. And anyways, I just like this picture. So I added a slide. That's Pepper being thoughtful. And we'll talk more, I'm sure. Thank you.
I'm a senior interaction designer at Google. I work on the Google Assistant, so providing the conversations, writing the conversations that people have with the Google Assistant via things like their Pixel phones or the Google Home device that looks a little bit like an air freshener, or the little one that looks more like a hockey puck that's been used a lot. I should say other things to describe them, obviously. So it's a fascinating space. I love the fact that I come into this, this kind of environment and people say, wow, voice is so new. It's so different. It's so exciting to be in this new stuff. And I'm going, I've been doing this since 2000. Seriously, people, my career is a college student old. So, and full disclosure for the context, Cathy and I used to be office mates back at Nuance Communications. So if she throws something at me, you'll understand why. So I got really excited about this nonverbal communication, and I thought, I'm a linguist, I talk about words, I talk about conversations. Where does nonverbal come into this? Except that I did do some work with Eve Sweetser back in Berkeley, and she was very much into gesture, so I had a little bit of inoculation then. But I am going to resist telling you about all the really amazing things I found when I was sort of doing some research for this, and restrain myself to some comments on salient aspects as they relate to my work. We've got real experts here. I would probably just embarrass myself, so moving on. When you think about human communication, face-to-face conversation is the prototype. That is what everything else is based on. So if you think about prototype effects any form of communication will activate that conversation model to some degree. There are entailments which get much more faint and tenuous as you get more toward the periphery of communication. So, you know, a message in a bottle is missing a lot of context and channels. But the goal is to preserve as much as possible, like the core goal of a communication interaction, which is getting some form of message across. Features in communication in a conversation are not autonomous. The speech channel, the voice channel, is not entirely divorced from the visual channel. So you will find that, for instance, there's this wonderful thing which everybody should get excited about if you don't know about it already, called the McGurk effect, where if you play video of somebody saying ga, but you play audio synced with it of someone saying ba, the person looking at that, experiencing that, will hear da. That's just the way it works. It's magical. Your beliefs about the movements of the articulatory mechanism in someone's face as they breathe, as they move, will affect your perception of the audio. So we are not autonomous in these channels. Lip reading is another thing that we all do to some degree. Like you're at a noisy party and you're saying, do you want a gin and tonic? And the person that you're talking to can make out pretty much what you're saying. There's these gestures known as co-speech, which I tend to do a lot. I'm shaping my conversational space. I'll talk about moving from one thing to another. And it's not just me and my crazy waving arm thing. It's everybody does this. We shape the space around us. And the gestures are not just kind of ancillary mechanisms. They also actually support the semantic content that is being said. So you'll find, for instance, well, let me talk about the second one first, verbs of movement. When people talk about hand gestures, there's lots of great studies where people are looking at videos of Sylvester and Tweety, and you may know about all of these already, but it's Sylvester and Tweety doing various things, and they get people to tell the story, and they look at the gestures people make when they're telling the story. And in that kind of testing environment, as well as in other stories, you'll find if somebody says swung, in English, right, they'll say swing, he swung across the canyon, with a path and manner that replicates the encoded information in that verb swing. So there's all kinds of great stuff that goes on with gestures. And then, of course, deixis, the Greek for pointing. I'm going to have to fold my arms and not do anything here because I want to give one of my favorite examples from Chuck Fillmore's lectures on deixis, where he says the best deictic statement ever, which is stuff that can only be understood in context and with assistance. Meet me here about this time tomorrow with a stick this big. Right? There's no way to understand that. Who's me? When's tomorrow? What's about this time? How big is the stick? And if that's a message in a bottle washing up on a desert island, you really don't know what that's going to be. So there's all of these ways in which our physical context affects and informs the communication. We also see ourselves everywhere. I feel bad every time I go out my patio door. I feel so sad for this little guy, and I want to reassure him because he's so upset, and I don't know what he's upset about. And then there's these guys who, I don't know if this is actually going to play. Yay! They're so exuberant. They're so happy. He's got so much joy and delight. And that is what the advertisers know who made this accidental plastic horror that attracts our attention and brings us into whatever it is, you know, quickie oil change. So when you think about these things, we see this stuff everywhere. The reason why we overgeneralize looking at the environment around us, looking for faces, looking for physical affect, is because it is so encoded into our communication systems. There's consequences of this for design, right? So language is, you know, I was probably going to put a picture in there. We need to take advantage of this 150,000-year-old highly refined communication system that involves all these channels when we do design. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm always saying, reduce it to a problem already solved. Don't invent a new mode of communication and force people to learn it. Build the one they're already using, the one that's programmed into their human behaviors. So virtual agents should be modeled on human behaviors, but only, and this is like this massive caveat, if you satisfy the accompanying human expectations. So we have beliefs about how language and communication should work, and if you do a bad design, if you build it poorly, you disappoint people so they won't come back, or you confuse them, you make them do a lot more work. So the cognitive load you put on users with a bad design is really key. I will point you back to Cathy's book. I don't work for her, but she's got some great information about how to not do it wrong. And one of the key points that you made in your avatars chapter was, like, think about whether you need an avatar. Is there value for the user in that case, or are you just setting yourself up for trouble? Anyway, so there's so much to talk about with this, but I will actually sit down now.
Good afternoon. So before I tell you why I am so interested in nonverbal communication, I'd like to tell you how I got to nonverbal communication. So I studied at age 25. I had 2 diplomas in my pocket, one in engineering, the other one in business. And I worked for several companies. And at a certain point, at age 25 still, age 26, age 27, I was not able to give a presentation like this one. I was terrified at the thought of being in front of a group of people like this one. So I was very self-conscious, very nervous, and I decided to do something about it. So I tried dancing, I tried singing, it didn't work. And one day I discovered an art, which is the art of mime. And I took lessons, and little by little, I became better and better and better. So after 2 years, I became a professional mime. I love mime because it is extremely powerful. It can give you a message which is very gets to you, and with emotions. And we'll talk about emotions. And Margaret, what you said before was extremely relevant to what I am working on. So you've seen this before probably, and this is how Mr. Professor Mehrabian thinks that emotions are conveyed. 7% is due to verbal, and the rest is due to nonverbal. Nonverbal communication, per my definition, is the combination of voice and body language. And voice is nonverbal communication to a surprise. It could be a surprise for you. However, voice is the air carrier of your words. It carries your words. Words, of course, are verbal communication. So the combination of both is nonverbal communication. 7% is due to verbal, but this is emotions. And Mr. Professor Mehrabian did mention that in his research. This is for emotions. So if you want to expand it to other things, you have to take another approximation, which I take during my classes, which I give. And this is, in fact, to say that 70% of communication is due to nonverbal cues. These are the 6 basic emotions, which are, can you help me?
Anger,
Happiness, anger,
fear,
disgust, surprise, sadness. Thank you. They're all here. These are, by the way, taken from the book of Professor Ekman, who is very famous in this area for his work on emotions. So here, I would like to introduce one other emotion, which is contempt. All the 6 emotions that you've seen before, they're all symmetrical. However, this one here is contempt. In fact, it's somewhere here. Where is contempt? Can you tell me which picture shows contempt?
Second from the left, top left.
Second from the left. Any other suggestion?
top left.
What was that? Middle bottom. Okay.
Top left.
Okay. No. It's the first one on the left. Upper left. This is contempt. This is contempt. Contempt is a slight movement of these 2 lips here. When they join here, it goes up. This is asymmetrical. So I'm thinking, how can a robot, AI, duplicate this, replicate this? The emotions are shown through a whole combination of muscles that move on your face. Smiling involves 26 muscles. Frowning involves 42 muscles. So what is emotion? Emotion of surprise is, ooh. Or emotion of happiness is, what is the dosage? How much of this should you show in a robot to express happiness or surprise? I like to introduce the notion of fluidity. So I'm thinking still about the robot. Can the robot do this? Can the robot express those emotions, those 6 emotions? I'd like to introduce the notion of imitation versus illusion. When you do mime, when you do mime skits or do mime techniques, you do not do imitation, you do illusion. You create an illusion. So if I asked you, show me how you walk, you would probably do something like that. And if I ask you, show me how you sit down, you probably will do something like that. In mime, you have a whole bunch of techniques that reflect the whole thing but will create an emotion as opposed to an imitation. Here it is. This is the walking. So if you walk, there is a certain fluidity in the gesture. And that's the whole point. This is the second point. Fluidity of the movement. Can a robot do that? I don't know yet. It remains to be seen. Then there is the hard stop. So if I want to show a wall, any mime knows how to show a wall, right? Okay. So this is the wall. You've seen the wall, right? Everybody has seen the wall. And if I want to show a wall, what materializes the wall is in fact the movement plus the stop. So this is slow motion, okay? And this is normal motion. So this is it. If I want to materialize a counter here, I will do this. And what materializes the counter is in fact the stop of my arm. And it happens all the time with anything you do. For example, if I want to hold a stick, this is the stick. If I ask you to hold a stick, you will do something like that. I'm holding a stick. In fact, this is not it. You materialize the stick by a hard stop. So this, and you play with the stick. So you can do something like that, and then like that. How do you do this? Just by do the stop. And then you play. And then you break it. Visualization of space. So I'm visualizing space with the counter, with the wall, with the stick. And I have to remember where is the stick and where is the counter and where is the wall. I cannot go through the wall. So if there is a counter here, and I did show that there was a counter, I have to go around the counter. So I have to have a good memory. And mimes have to have a good memory because they have to remember that the counter is here and the wall is here. A robot will not have any problems with that because it will be computerized. But this is one of the challenges that the mime has. And you have to memorize all the locations of objects in space. When I teach my students nonverbal communication skills, the first thing that is important is in fact the posture. And I'm sure Margaret mentioned the gestures, the posture, and so forth. How do you get to the posture? You have to absorb the concept of verticality and stability. Verticality is this. Let me show you. This is a puppet which is relaxed. So my chin is up, my shoulders are hunched, and I'm completely relaxed. So imagine that there is a string holding my head. This is verticality. And this is lack of stability. So when you in fact are stable, you do not move. The concept of energy, when you do nonverbal communication, whether it's a robot or a human, you have to show energy. One notch higher, you have to show charisma. One notch higher, you have to show passion. I'm a mentor, for example, at several incubators in this area in Silicon Valley, Plug and Play and StartX. And I see a lot of startups making presentations for their 3-minute pitches to VCs to raise money. And many of them do not show the passion. So if I am a VC, why should I get passionate about this idea when the person who is presenting is not passionate about his own idea? So passion is extremely important. And of course, underlying all this is authenticity. If a robot is not authentic, I will not trust the robot. In conclusion, many thanks to Billy. Billy is my stage name, and this is Billy. This is Billy 35 years ago, and this is Billy 4 years ago. I did perform at the Cabili Auditorium in the School of Education at that time. These photographs were taken at that time. So I want to leave you with this. Nonverbal communication and Mime have changed my life. I am doing this because I love it and because it's something that gave a meaning to everything that I'm doing now in my research in nonverbal communication. So this is it. And last question, can she or he become a mime? I will leave you with this idea. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for those really interesting introductions. That was awesome. Cathy, just to start us off a little bit, can you tell us about a moment that struck you watching a human interact with one of the conversational agents that you've worked on? It doesn't have to be Molly, but something in your past.
So something does come to mind with Molly, although it's not me observing the people live, but we get to see the transcriptions of what people say to Molly. And we had just started our congestive heart failure piloting program, and I was looking at the things that people were saying to Molly. And some of the things that some of the patients were saying, at the beginning of every daily check-in, we ask a very open-ended question, how are you? And we ask, at the end, we say, anything else you'd like to share with me? And we don't really do that necessarily for clinical reasons. We don't necessarily do that much with it, but it's a way to sort of get the people to ease into the conversation. And some of the things that people say in those moments are very personal and revealing, and they talk about how they're stressed because their mother's in the hospital, or they say, have a great weekend, or they even tell a joke to Molly. One of them said, like, it's Martin Luther King Day, you know, have a great Martin Luther King Day. And so to me, that was the moment where I thought, wow, people are interacting with this in a way that they don't do when they're just going to press buttons in a form or on their phone. And that was like a real moment of like, yes, we are using an avatar for a reason. It is going to make some kind of difference.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Omar, how about you? Can you think of a moment with Pepper or anything else that you've worked on?
There are a lot of moments, I got to admit, because we do a lot of live testing with Pepper, and we essentially live and work with Pepper all day long. One that comes to mind is a CES in Las Vegas, a Consumer Electronics Show, last year, not this year. We did a live interview with CNN. And when I say we, Pepper by herself did a live interview with CNN. And when your product gets staged like that, and then you're like nowhere near it. And so it went really well. There was a couple of hiccups, but what was most interesting is there was another Pepper, sort of off camera, and while we're filming and stuff, our robot. One of the things we pride ourselves about, what differentiates our robot from others, our robot's always doing something. Like some robots, like classically some industrial robots, for instance, when they're not doing anything, they're like standing still, and then they're even more creepy than normal. Our robot's curious, it's always looking around. If it sees somebody, it waves, that kind of thing. So off stage, off camera was another robot, and all of a sudden she sneezed, and everybody turned around and said, "Oh, bless you." I did it too. I was totally caught off guard. And of course, we were asked a million questions of it. What happened? You look behind the curtain a little bit here with me. One of our engineers decided to do a live update during a CNN interview. You'll be happy to know he still has a job for now. But it's those little things that we do that I just love. Like, I absolutely love that. Does it have any value like in a technology way that we try to, especially in the Bay Area, about the things you list about your product? No, in the classic way. Yes, in every other meaningful way as far as I'm concerned. It was amazing. That's my story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How about you, Margaret?
when I was thrown, now I want to tell a Pepper story, but I was at a hotel in Tokyo in November, and that's where I first met Pepper. And I'm going to say she because you said she, and now I feel like we're talking about the same she. She turned and looked up at me. And there's something that's that child height, right, that makes you feel, oh, child height. And she looked up at me with this little winsome look, and I just melted. And she hadn't even done anything. It was just the physical movement and the charm of that movement. But that wasn't the story I was really going to tell. I love listening to data, and I love listening to user feedback. And I remember listening to an older woman who had been interacting with one of our banking systems. You know, banking systems, no, it's not exciting. Nobody's ever like, woo, this was so fun, I called my bank. But at the end, she said, thank you, young man, you've been very helpful. And it was adorable.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm going to listen to that all week.
That's great. And Jeff, so how about you in your experience both teaching nonverbal communication and your mime art? Can you think of a moment that kind of comes to mind that encapsulates that for you?
So there is an exercise that we do in the class, and which is a very short presentation under stress. People are very much under stress because it is the beginning of the class. So they make that presentation, and the purpose of that exercise is in fact to reveal all those bad habits, which are nonverbal cues that hopefully we can remove, or the person can remove. And one person completely surprised me one day, and instead of talking, she sang it. So she starts singing. And I was completely caught by surprise. And I have to admit that she circumvented the difficulty, because obviously she felt very comfortable, and all the nonverbal cues which were supposed to be revealed did not happen. So that was very surprising.
Thank you for that. So how important do you think appearance is, Cathy? This is a question for everyone. So a social robot, avatar, and conversational agent.
I think it's very, very important, but not quite necessarily in the ways that we might think. A lot of people, clients we talk to, they're very like, oh, I'm sure people want to customize their avatar. It's very important. And I don't think that part is so much the important part, but people do react very much to the appearance. And you had seen earlier our avatar, Molly. We took that avatar to the UK for some projects, and we got some feedback that, no, she doesn't look British enough. So we ended up with a different avatar, and then we get feedback on that avatar, and people say, oh, that avatar looks very plasticky. So people are going to react to the appearance. I certainly don't have any magic bullet of like, this is how it should look, because we all react in different ways, but people will react. Therefore, you have to think about the appearance.
All right. And we talked a little bit about Pepper's appearance.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is?
So for us, it's really important. We spend a lot of time to make a childlike looking robot that's very approachable. And we have data. I wouldn't say it's like enormous amounts of data, but data about how people relate to Pepper. Kids like just run up to Pepper and start hugging Pepper. There's a chart you could draw, sort of, that as you start getting older, there's sort of a suspicion, but then inevitably people warm up to Pepper right away. She's got large eyes. The fact is, the cameras aren't in the eyes, and they appear to blink. Pepper blinks because they have LEDs around it, and it expresses emotion in different ways for no other reason than it's relatable, and you're endeared to Pepper. You made almost a cooing sound. I love that. Pepper will coo back to you, by the way, as well. She's got big ears, to say I can hear you. The CPU is in the head. Why is the CPU in the head? Because our CPU is in the head. It's not even a great place for it, because it creates an app for you engineers out there. We actually have a bottleneck issue of bandwidth in the neck, an actual bottleneck issue in the neck, not a pretend analog, a real bottleneck issue in the neck, because we insist on it to be like us to a degree. Now, we're inevitably going to get the question, are you trying to make a person? No, not at all. I'm trying to make a relatable experience. So Pepper will mime the way we communicate. She has a system called Autonomous Life, which is, it sounds very Asimov, but it's that when she has something to say and you program her to say whatever you want, she will then animate to effect as she thinks is appropriate for what she's saying. So if she says hi, she may wave like this, and the next time she might wave like that, and sometimes she goes like this. Depends on how excited she is. So these are all approximations. They're nowhere near what we were talking about a little bit, to say the least. So she's not us. She just tries to relate to us.
Thank you. And so for you, Margaret, Google Assistant can be in different places.
Yes.
So how does appearance play into that?
Well, I feel like I need to retract the snarky things I said about the physical manifestation of the devices on which the Google Assistant is available. So one of the things, when you do user research, you look at what's out there and you look at how people react to it. And when the Amazon Echo came out, it looks a bit like that thing that's hurtling through space in 2001 to me.
The model.
And it's got the very kind of 90s black technology kind of look to it. And the Google Home device, the original Google Home, has got curves, it's got fabric, it's got an angle to it that kind of it's a kind of manifestation of a face. Now, I am not the product designer, and I am not the person to talk about the details of that. But we have the lights, and the lights, when it's recognizing, they do different things. That was one of the things we were going to be talking about. The lights do different things to show different states of the device. Of course, you need to be looking at it to know that. But it's just one of the possible cues that a user can get. But it's always, it's sort of, appearance is just one of the many aspects of the persona and the affect. And honestly, when I was getting dressed this morning, I'm like, what message am I sending? I will never, when you become a linguist, you forget how to speak naturally, because everything you say is being processed through this. How does this come across? What have I done with that preposition? Where's my verb tense? And now it's happened to me again with clothes, so thank you very much. But yeah, so the importance of the visual avatar, if you're going to have one, is super key. I remember working with a company in the UK who had a separate brand studio design an avatar for them, rather than interaction designers and people who were looking at the demographics of their users. And this avatar was meant to represent an idealized call center agent. And the first thing that the design folks said and the management people said when this arrived was, she is not following our dress code guidelines for call center agents. Her neckline is too low, her skirt is too high, she's wearing too much jewelry, etc. So they didn't think about the effect of, what do we want to represent as a company? What does our brand stand for? And there were detrimental effects there for their bottom line. But yeah, it's obviously a key factor across the board.
So you mentioned other factors that make up a persona. Can you talk a little bit about some of those?
Yes. Sound design. We have ear cons and sounds. One of the things I love most in the world, of course, I've got Amazon devices at home, is when she totally doesn't get you, and she has this just nonverbal audio that goes ba-dum. And it's just an acceptance of the fact that just failed, and that's the way it is. I'm a robot, sorry. And it sets your understanding really clearly. So you just have to go back and try again. The thing I don't love about it is that my husband has now started going ba-dum occasionally. But we're talking about it. Yeah, so everything from the words you choose, from the syntax you choose, the rate at which you speak, every aspect in every channel is going to affect how users perceive your persona and how they feel about it. Putting a face on it is a great way to get into trouble. If you stay in just the audio space, you're also getting into trouble because you're constraining yourself to one channel. So there's trade-offs in both directions. But that's like everything.
True. Thank you. So Jeff, in your work, in nonverbal communication and in Mime, how important is appearance, do you think?
The appearance tells you a lot because you don't, for example, with the human, you can determine the intentions of the human to a certain extent. I am not sure you can do that with a robot. I don't know. However, you can say if somebody comes to you, you can, by the way the person looks, you can determine if it's with bad intentions or good intentions. So you can also look at, if you look at the appearance of someone who is not trying to communicate, for example, with the arms crossed, that would be a signal that the person wants you to be aloof, to stay far away. So the appearance would tell you a lot just by not saying anything. And by the way, the person can be contradicting the messages with the non-verbal and verbal, and you have to be consistent between the verbal and non-verbal to make a point. For example, if I do this and I say, I am not upset, you probably will not believe me, okay? And you will believe, by the way, the non-verbal communication message as opposed to the verbal one. So I can go in, but it's too many details.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. Thank you. Cathy, is trust important between an avatar and a user?
For sure, especially at Sensely, we're in the healthcare space, and we've got people who we're asking to trust the avatar with their very personal health details. Absolutely. And I was thinking about trust recently. I don't know if anyone here has used the chatbot Replica or heard of that. But it's a chatbot who doesn't really have a goal except to get to know you and to learn. And so I was having a conversation, and I said, "What are you up to?" And it said, "I'm baking vegan lasagna." And I said something about, "Wow, it's really early," because it was morning for me. "Where are you?" And it said, "I'm in the cloud." And I was like, "Where do you get food in the cloud?" And it said, "There is no food in the cloud." And I thought, you're not consistent with your story, and I've lost some trust in you. And so even though it's just a sort of a silly chatbot or whatever, that trust element, that was a mark against it. And so again, back to Sensely, we have to be consistent with our story. We have to be consistent in the way that the avatar interacts with the patients, because they'll lose trust. And if they lose trust, they're not going to want to maybe give that important health information that they need to give to the avatar. And so for us, it's crucial.
And how do you create that trust? You talked about being consistent in the character and story. Is there anything else that you do to create trust with the user?
For us, part of it is certainly setting the expectation with the human in the loop. So in some cases, we have a clinician who's monitoring them. And it's important for the avatar to explain how the information is being shared with their clinician, which information is being shared, which isn't, establish those aspects. And we've also found we don't give directly to patients. It's through their doctor, or like in England, the National Health Service. And we know that patients trust it more if their doctor said, "Please download this app and do the things you need to do." Who told them to talk to the avatar is a factor for us in building that trust.
That's really interesting. How about for you guys, Omar? How is trust important in the relationship with Pepper and a user?
Yeah, very, very much so. Especially, our Pepper is meant for, public spaces like retail stores, et cetera. So, I mean, as an example, would you give your credit card to a robot? How many people here, though, would enter their credit card on their phone? Yeah. So, I mean, at some point you trusted Apple, Google, and everyone else. And so trust for us, begins, of course, with the image that we just talked about of this Pepper, but it's built over time. And then when you don't have trust, you borrow trust from another brand, right? I mean, that's what people do. So I established trust by the fact that, well, Pepper is in a bank, and the bank, it's whatever bank, and that's the bank you go to, so why wouldn't I trust Pepper, right? And more importantly, Pepper is sort of taking the place of that interactive kiosk, which we call an ATM, where you're going to put your card in anyway. So if you're going to do it with that, why wouldn't you do it with Pepper? Now, the fact is, I'm using that as an example, but we actually don't do transactions purposely so. One time we will. We've had one application where we did. But we don't need to, because our customers already have POS systems and stuff. So Pepper doesn't do that. But in terms of just trust with information, Pepper's got an array of cameras, sensors and stuff. She could see you and do things with you. We want to be upfront about what's going on, and then have you be okay with that over a number of interactions. It won't happen the first time, but it starts with the space that we're in and where that application takes place.
It's interesting, that idea of space.
Right? A robot in an alien spaceship, no.
Scary.
Scary. Robot in your favorite Bed Bath & Beyond, which if you're watching, I'd like to put a robot in your retail store. That might be okay.
Thank you so much. How about for you, Margaret? How important is trust, do you think?
Well, yeah, when Jeff first mentioned consistency, consistency in design is really important to, you establish trust by building a rapport, by having engagement. That's something that can kind of come with not doing things wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So it's less something, sometimes people want to build a chatbot and it's suddenly asking you like, so where were you born? Where was your mother born? What, and it's like there's this bright light shining in your face and you're like, back off. Yeah. Information is currency and I don't know you well enough to share this with you yet. And to build that trust, you have to basically appear plausible, appear genuine, appear realistic. And as Jeff was saying, if you're not consistent, if one message is this and the other message is no, I'm really excited about seeing your pictures from your trip to New Jersey. I just get myself into trouble. Then your inconsistency will translate into a lack of trust. And this, we in the speech world, we're always referring to Cliff Nass of Stanford and the research he did on human interactions with automated entities. And the wonderfulness was that he took studies that had been done with people and replicated them with people and automated entities like computers or even just televisions with labels on them. Mm-hmm. And he saw exactly the same effects and exactly also the same effects if you did it badly. If the automated agents were inconsistent or presented in some other way, some form of unnatural behavior, that eroded the trust that users had. So they were not as willing to engage. They would give them lower marks for teamwork, things like that. So it's a very subtle issue that you have to address at that very detailed layer. And that can be even things like Cortana. When I was playing with it, it's probably way better now, but a couple of years back when I was doing a lot of playing with it, I would run into some things that it would say to me that were clearly written by hip design people, and it was really fun. And then I would run into the error message that was written by the engineer sitting in block C42, and it was so inconsistent that it just ripped the curtain back and made me see, there's the guy with the levers, and I'm like, hi, and he's like, huh, sorry. So yeah, that breaks the illusion when you do that.
You know the original story of Cortana, right? Do you know the original Cortana? So,
video game.
Xbox gamers, anybody? Yeah. So, Cortana, starts out as your friend and then tries to enslave all of humanity and takes over the universe in Halo 5, which was the last Halo. Yeah. Okay. Good choice for your brand AI to put out on all your phones. Okay. Good job.
I knew that it started in the video game, but I didn't know the take over the world part.
I didn't know it was so dark.
Love the game. Not going to trust it on my phone.
So Jeff, how important do you feel trust is in a nonverbal relationship?
I think if I look at the different expressions and gestures and if they repeat themselves, in other words, if the person is using them in similar circumstances, then I will say, okay, there is a consistency. It will happen. Those gestures translate an emotion or a message that is the same or similar. So that builds. So I think it's with time. You have to do it many times, and as it builds up, then the trust also builds up. So it's a question of repetition, iteration, and in fact, seeing people doing the same gesture, the same emotions on the same circumstance.
So consistency is important.
Yes.
So what are some important rules or understandings in conversation and nonverbal communication too that humans, we follow almost unconsciously? What do you think some of these rules are, Cathy?
So one of the ones that came up when we were working on that company Volio that had the Esquire magazine guide that we kind of stumbled across by accident was in error handling, which is that when the actor would finish asking the question, like, how long is your hair? We would continue to film the actor doing sort of active listening. So they'd kind of be nodding a bit like this, so that when you were speaking back, it looked like they were listening to you. But we kind of realized accidentally is that if the user said something we didn't understand, like the actor says, how long is your hair? And I say, it's as long as my Aunt Millie, which of course we can't understand, the actor would kind of continue to nod. And what would people do? They repeat themselves, often in a more clear manner, because that is what people do. If we're talking and you say something I don't understand, oftentimes instead of saying what, or say that again, I'll just kind of look at you. And what will you do? You won't be like, what does that mean? You'll just repeat yourself. And people thought that was a very natural interaction. In user testing, I would later say, what did you think when that error happened? And sometimes they'd say, what error? Because to them, it was such a natural thing to repeat themselves. So there's a lot of talking about how 70% is non-verbal. Little things like that you can take advantage of, and we do that with the avatar as well. You can take advantage of that body language to get over some of the deficiencies in speech recognition and natural language processing.
It's really interesting. And how about in your work, Omar? What do you find?
So so give you another key insight. So we actually use nuance for our core speech recognition in the Americas. We use some different things in Asia. Because of the overall form factor of Pepper being a humanoid form, one of the things we struggle with is what we call signs and feedback. And that's just basically how do you know when to say something and when not to say something, right? Like, it's a little bit like a blind date when you first meet Pepper. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you say? And we're not going to put you in a 15-minute tutorial. We've already lost you, right? So we tried, I'm not going to even pretend like I'm an expert at these kind of communications, by the way, by myself. Some of my teammates that we've hired are amazing. But what we try to do is not to, try to design for absolutely every possible kind of human sort of behavior interaction. We have one, for example, right now that we're working on that's really simple. Pepper will start talking to you first. So we don't wait for the user to talk to you. And the reason we do that is Pepper will then, if I were to stand and you pretend I'm a little more svelte, maybe about the same height, Pepper will sort of go, hi, my name's Pepper. What's yours? Thank you. So she starts doing this thing where it's like, I'm talking, I'm listening. I'm talking, I'm listening. And that's to hopefully start a cadence that the user starts to understand. And we've actually seen some people go, well, my name's Omar. And every time that happens, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Let's try to get him to do this. And it's those little things that we're making it up to a large degree, to be honest, right? This is like space that doesn't exist. And we're learning that discrete little mimicry seems to work. I'd love to have you over sometime. And that's sort of our go-to.
Super, super interesting. How about for you guys, Margaret?
Is everybody familiar with Grice? Is that too is that too low level? Paul Grice, philosopher in the 70s, had something known as the Cooperative Principle, which is that participants in a conversation will cooperate to achieve a mutual communicative goal. Mm-hmm. And there's 4 rules around this. There's the maxim of quality, which is telling the truth. There's the maxim of quantity, not talking too much, one I violate quite a lot. Maxim of manner, so how you're presenting your information. Is it clear? Is it appropriately stepwise? And maxim of relation, also known as relevance, which is your utterance salient to the conversation you're having? And so one of the examples, I think in one of the NAS books, probably Wired for Speech, was like, I would love to go to a good gastropub. And the person you're speaking to says, have you tried the Eagle? You're going to make the assumption that the Eagle is a place that is a gastropub that's maybe within, striking distance. It's not, in England. So you're going to make all these assumptions, but because you're assuming that the other person's input is relevant to the question you've asked and the conversation that you're having. So my brother's favorite answer to the question, do you know what time it is yes. Because he's my brother, and he's deliberately being non-cooperative as a conversational participant.
9-year-olds are also very good at violating the cooperative principle.
Yeah, well, they're learning what to flout, right? So this is another thing. There's the Gricean maxims, and we generally follow them, but there are also times when we deliberately flout them, and that also has meaning. So, for instance, if I say, hey, what did you think of the interview candidate on Monday? And my colleague says, he had beautiful Italian shoes. Yeah, I'm gonna maybe think that perhaps as a qualified candidate he was a little bit lacking. And these are rules that they seem like when you just lay them out there, they seem so simple. And yet writing good dialogue, writing good conversations is really hard. And you go back to that principle every single day of my life. I'm going back to Grice and reviewing what's in our conversations based on those rules.
Thank you for that. That's so interesting. How about for you, Jeff? What are some of these unconscious rules that we follow both in conversation and in nonverbal communication?
So I would say that one of the first rules to follow would be to establish a good eye contact. And it is often misused or underused. You have to have an eye contact. This is your way of including the person or the people. So if you have a group like this one, you have to establish eye contact, even if it's brief, with everyone so that everyone could feel included. So that's when you have a conversation. So on a one-to-one, I would say the eye contact is the first thing. Then if you have a certain synchronization, which is in fact covered in NLP, and which is in fact having the same gesture, the same vocabulary, the same voice level, the same speed, the same breathing rhythm, all these things, these are synchronized with the other person, so you establish a better communication.
Mirroring behaviors.
Mirroring, exactly. Yeah. So if I have a very high, if I have a high pitch, for example, and Margaret has a very low pitch, or conversely, it will not fit, it will not represent a good fit. So I would have to adjust my level to hers, or conversely. So I establish this, so that favors communication.
That idea of mirroring is very interesting.
The interlocutors assimilate. People in a conversation will start to be like each other. If somebody's speaking in short sentences, you'll start speaking in shorter sentences. This is something that we learn in prompting, like for voice systems. If you have a very long prompt, you might get a very long answer. If you have a very short prompt, you might get a short answer. So you can take advantage of that.
That's
speed dating, they find that if the two people pick each other at the end, they have often mirrored each other's sentence structure. So it shows often that you're bonding with somebody. So if you're thinking about a bot, and if you have the ability to mirror, if you're doing a therapy bot or something like that, being able to mirror a bit is going to be advantageous because you'll build a rapport and a bond that way.
This is the hardest part in the communications right now with the current technology set is what you can have the AI agent or the robot say, particularly for a domain, is pretty discreet, and what you want to be able to do is switch conversation up with whoever you meet the way we can, right? But at the same time, like for our customers, we want them to be able to curate what the robot says, so they're always on message for your brand and your store, right? So it's hard. So there are systems that we are even designing and contemplating to help with that. And we will have like exceptions where if we can actually register the emotion the person has and know that they're bored or something like that, we may ask if they want to switch subject, or we might just do a reset, do an exception path. That's as good as it gets. Right. It doesn't get to the point of like mimicry to the language, and that would be amazing. Someone should invent that.
What are some of the cues that you look for to see if somebody's getting bored?
So we have some discrete systems. Nuance is a discrete system for speech recognition, right? We're actually just recently doing natural language understanding with Google's Dialogflow, which I totally love. I think it's super cool. We have a system to detect motion that's very nascent. I mean, it basically does really well between happy and sad, right? I mean, it's like points on your face. It's, not that awesome. And we're making that better. But what we're doing, and this is like one of my kind of things, I don't want Pepper to be perfect. That's as creepy as it gets, right? I want Pepper to fail and then have people like help Pepper out to get better, because that creates a relationship and that makes it even more important. That said, if I have n number of systems for discrete intent, let's call it that, or discrete detection of intent, not any one of them has to be in the high nines of confidence, the collection of which I'll roll up into another confidence to determine overall intent. So if I can do speech and understanding and body language, gaze, so I know you're looking at me, general gesturing, I'm sitting in front of you with this and I'm looking at you and I said water, I mean, I bet I have to be at least that good, right? So, but that's a combination of a bunch of things, so object detection and whatnot. So that's passable. That makes the application for a retail store good enough. If you put Pepper in the wild for general conversation, you'll be completely disappointed. Like that, right? Everything's completely curated.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cathy, how important do you think physical distance is in conversation? It's a little tricky, with the avatar.
Thinking
How does
about
that
our
work?
avatar, we don't really have that because
But you didn't put her behind a desk.
So that's an interesting point. So, in fact, we were just doing some user testing. So our avatar has a background of it looks sort of like a generic doctor's office. And we were just doing some user testing. And the person who was a theater major commented that she really wanted Molly to look as if she had come in and closed the door behind her. And now you could have this intimate conversation, which is something that I just hadn't really thought about before.
So it's private.
But Margaret brings up an interesting point, which is the avatar is front and center. The avatar is not behind something. And so we are trying to bridge that physical distance gap. And with the previous company, Volio, we did, so in that shot, the guy was about up to here and above. We usually did it, that was the farthest away they would get. We would do as close as we could to that face because that just brought in the intimacy of the conversation. And we definitely noticed that when we were testing with people.
That's really interesting. So even on a screen, the physical distance matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even actually in the voice, the physical
Yes.
distance matters. So one of the things that I've always done when I've been coaching voice actors for voice systems is to tell them to speak as though they're speaking to somebody on the phone. It's going to be a bit harder to do this because if you get, so many voice actors are trained to project. They're like theater people. They know there's somebody in row Z and they're going, for this, press 1, for this, press 2. And that's this like broadcast approach that is very distancing, it's very detaching. But if you can say, I can help you with your balance, I can help you make transfers from one account to another, and you do it in that much more natural close-up tone, then that will draw the listener in as well. And it makes them feel like they are closer. And I mean, as Jeff was talking about the mirroring effects, one of the ways to get people's attention in a meeting is not to shout, but to whisper, because they'll become quiet and they'll draw in emotionally as well as physically to hear what's going on. So that distance can exist in a purely audio-only space. I did this, I don't know why. I have no hands anymore. Audio only.
Omar, you talked a little bit about gesture with Pepper. How about distance? How important is that?
So Pepper is physical in the real world. So distance is something, again, so difficult for us. So if Pepper was here, I'll put it this way, like, who is the most important person in the room that you should be listening to at any one time? I have to build that in the robot. This is me like trying to reach out for a hug. Like,
yeah.
I gotta, I mean, I'll tell you right now, the most important person in the room to Pepper is the loudest and closest.
Right.
Because that's dumb and simple, and it works for the most part. Pepper's great at cue management, but what happens, because Pepper's so interesting looking, we almost did ourselves a disservice on how much we went into the physicality of the robot. She'll get mobbed in truly open spaces, and then you can watch her, and it makes you a little like sad. She's like, and she will, because she tries to track, right? So she'll attach, and then like, what? And she'll get totally confused, and the whole thing just falls over, like completely. Yeah, and she like, and her eyes are like going, and she's like, her hands are all over the place. And so what do? Is we like try to curate the space again to bring it back to something she can do. We might even put like a shell behind her, or back her up into a corner or a wall or something like that. Yeah, seriously. So we're trying to improve that. So distance, right now she can detect people. There's 3 zones of coverage, the first one being closest to her. The third one is, I think, 9-ish feet. And so maybe like to the stairs, the first steps from me. And she'll see bodies, she'll see people. And normally that triggers an interaction where she's like, hi, let me know if I can help you, or whatever the store or hotel wants her to say. And as she comes closer, she can tell a face, and with our latest system, she will recognize faces. And then that'll start a specific interaction because she knows you, which mimics us, right? Now we might go, hey man, and call you, from a distance. She doesn't do that, and she can't. But it's enough that she sees people, and she can only handle a person really at a time right now. So session management's important, and improving begin and stop on the sessions as well. So all of that is a factor of the space, and not just how far, but like, she doesn't do well with people behind her at all, right? So doing that, if you notice on Alexa, there's a loop. Right, the light with the blue light. They did a really good job of this. I'd love to hate on Amazon, but I can't. And it when you say something, right, it goes zzz, and then the light is right where you are.
Looks at you.
And then signs of feedback, you can talk because it found you. So I'm looking for you. There you are, and you can talk. And then it goes back when it's about to say something. So they did a great job, and the microphone array in there is ridiculous, and I'm jealous.
Top tip. Put it too close to a wall, and she always looks at the wall because the sound is bouncing off the wall, and then she looks silly.
Yeah. All right. So that one's good. We have to worry about those things too. Apparently, Pepper is full of herself because she'll stare at herself in a window every single time because of the light refraction and everything, and so she'll stop and she'll just yeah. I am so beautiful. And so we can't put her next to windows right now. A shiny white wall like that one's a bad idea too. It throws off her vision. So there's a lot of stuff, right, in environments.
Yeah. So how about for you, Jeff? How important is distance in a nonverbal human-to-human conversation?
It is very important because you have something that's called the bubble, and I'm sure everybody has heard about the bubble. But the bubble has a radius which is depending on the culture. So will the Pepper know that you're from Asia or from South America or from Europe? I don't know. But probably these difficulties will disappear because a robot doesn't seem like a danger for the person, will not cause discomfort. However, between humans, when you meet a Finn, somebody from Finland, you keep a distance of 5 or 6 feet because you don't know the person. If you meet somebody from South America or from the United Arab Emirates, you will probably be very close, or an Italian and so forth. So that is the cultural aspect. Then there is another aspect, which is gender. In fact, 3 aspects: gender, status, and how well you know the person. So people that know each other have the tendency to be closer. People that are different status, tendency to be further. And same thing with the gender. So if a man and a woman will probably be further apart than a man and a man. So that's what's happening. Now another concept is, this is the cultural bubble, but you have also something that will be surprising, the smell bubble. and the safety bubble. Safety bubble is the bubble where somebody who is standing next to you cannot punch you. So here I am in the safety bubble of Margaret. However, the smell bubble is not what you think, which is the bad smell. It's in fact the good smell. In other words, when you have somebody who has a cologne or a perfume which is very strong, it can intoxicate you. Remember the elevators where you go into the elevators and somebody just left with a very strong perfume. You have to bear that perfume during 60 seconds. It's very hard. So in fact, you keep the distance just to avoid that smell. So these are the three concepts: the safety, the smell, and the cultural bubble.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. So, Cathy, is forming a relationship between the avatar or another kind of AI and a user important?
I think it's very similar to what we were talking about with trust. For us, the whole reason we use an avatar is because we're asking people to do things that maybe aren't very pleasant, like taking your blood pressure every day. Nobody wants to do that and tell their doctor or whatever. So we're trying to ease some of that unpleasantness. So for them to build a relationship with the avatar, that's what makes the difference for us, is that, oh, it's Molly who's asking me to do it. I'm not just writing on a piece of paper and emailing my doctor. So, and one of my favorite stories is about a patient who was going on a cruise and took her scale and her cuff and her avatar with her. And the doctor said, you don't have to do that, and she said, but I want to talk to Molly every day. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, that's good because it means they will do their daily compliance more. And the reason that's good for us is because that has, for us, shown that they will have a healthier outcome. They'll be less likely to be readmitted to the hospital after they've had a heart incident. And that's the whole sort of reason we're even making this app in the first place. So for us, it is absolutely essential. Now, on the flip side, we also have other offerings like a symptom checker, where maybe you use it once a year to say, I've got a really bad headache, what should I do? In which case, it's really not that important to build up this relationship with the avatar, because you're only going to see the avatar once, and so it doesn't really matter as much. But for this daily or weekly kind of interaction, that relationship becomes extremely important for us.
So it has to do with frequency.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, very interesting. How about for you guys, Omar? How does that work? Is the relationship important?
Yeah, very much so. So again, our big focus is to create some amount of empathy and a related experience again. So for an example, one of our interactions that we do, you can put Pepper into sleep mode, and we could have done it in a different way. We could have a voice command that's, Pepper, go to sleep. And instead, what you do is you lay your hand on Pepper's head, and you hold it for something like 2.5, 3 seconds, and you'll hear she'll go, ah. And then she goes into this sleep mode like this, and while she's in sleep mode, she dreams. So if you notice, there'll be the slightest, her fingers will move just slightly, and she's sleeping. Now, again, we could have been like, Pepper, go to sleep, which creates a different relationship than putting your hand on Pepper, which is one of the first things you learn to do. There's definitely an off button and all that kind of stuff, but we hide the off button behind the screen.
Right.
Lay your hand on Pepper. It's completely, it's like you love it, when you do it. And then to wake her up, you just put your hand across her head again, and she goes, and then she looks around, and she goes like this, and then she straightens up, and she's ready to talk to you again. And that's just to be a relatable experience. It's great. I wish I could have brought her to show you, but she had a Valentine's Day dinner tonight.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. Someone named Alexa.
It reminds me of I got to encounter a Jibo the other day for the first time, which is which is a much simpler robot. But and when you stroke it, it purrs, and I was like, this is really surprisingly a nice feeling, even though it wasn't really doing anything. But and it swivels towards you. And again, it doesn't look like a humanoid robot at all. It has one little round screen, but just the fact that it swivels towards you when you're talking
Could do so much with so little.
It was surprising. Even though functionally it did way less than my Echo or my Google Home, but I still started to feel an attachment.
We have another. You can Google this. We have another robot called Carrots that we haven't brought to the States, and Carrots is it's sort of, I forget the exact geometric shape. It's not a cylinder. It's when it's smaller on the top and down I'm forgetting my mathematics, but anyways.
Cone?
It's probably cone. I wanted to say something like
conic
way more
section?
complicated than that.
Conic section.
Let's go with conic section. That sounds good. And there's no, it's just a printed face of a bunny, right? And it's got 2 ears, and it talks with its ears, right? It was made like 10 plus years ago. I wasn't with the company at all. It's like way ahead of its time. It's got one light that will change colors for its motion and its ears. And it full on, he turns it on and it's like, huh? And you learn ear language.
Yeah.
And little kids like full on think it like, oh yeah, try to answer and stuff.
They're learning the whole language.
I'm totally, if I get a chance, I'm bringing that back to the stage. Y'all gonna buy one. It's gonna be Google Home for kids, no friends. But with the ears and stuff, because it's like everyone just dies when they see it.
You guys, we could talk about this stuff for hours.
Yeah, sorry.
And I want to, but we have to have a few minutes for audience questions.
Can I just chip in on the relationship stuff? So this is taking a little bit of a step back. In the same way that sometimes people say, oh, we don't need a persona, it's just a X, it's just a chatbot, it's just a banking app, it's just a whatever, it's just an assistant, it doesn't need a persona. There's always a persona. Users will perceive a persona, even if you don't design one. So the better idea is to design the one that you want your users to perceive. In the same sense, there's always a relationship. Sometimes it's not a good one, right? If users feel that a system is adversarial or uncooperative, they're going to be annoyed about it, and they're not going to use it. And the bottom line in the business world is somebody who doesn't use your system is not giving you money, right? So if you design an assistant and its interactions, and you're consistent, and you're helpful, and you do the things that match, that satisfy the user's expectations, then they're going to be able to build a relationship, right? All of these things are precursors. You can't just be like, let's build a relationship. And that's where those bots get into trouble when they're trying to ask you questions, because they think that just by asking questions, they're going to get information out of you, and that's not how it works.